Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Moves Done X'd. On this channel, you'll have the opportunity to learn a lot. It will ignite the passion within you to achieve something great. So let's begin. My son tried to end me. This is your last breath, he said as he unplugged my oxygen, but The hospital room was quiet, too quiet for a place meant to save lives. Machines hummed softly. The faint scent of disinfectant hung in the air, and the dim glow from the monitor reflected on the pale face of a man who had seen far too much of life and pain. His name was Richard Hale, a retired teacher known for his calm voice and gentle soul. He had spent his entire life nurturing young minds, never knowing that the storm that would nearly end him would come from his own blood, his only son. It began on an ordinary afternoon. The nurses had changed his IV, and Richard was drifting between sleep and wakefulness when he heard the door creak open. He thought it was the nurse, as always, but when he turned his head slightly he saw him, Daniel, his son. The boy he had once carried on his shoulders, the same boy who used to laugh until his stomach hurt. But tonight, Daniel's eyes carried no laughter, only a quiet rage that burned cold and deep. "Hey, son," Richard said weakly, forcing a smile, his voice trembling as oxygen hissed beside him. "Didn't think you'd come tonight." Daniel didn't reply, he just stood there staring at his father with an unreadable expression. The silence stretched until it became heavier than the air in the room. "You know," Daniel finally said, his tone low and sharp, "I've been thinking a lot lately, about you, about everything you've done. Teach strangers how to live their lives while you forgot how to be a father." The words hit Richard harder than any physical blow. He wanted to reach out to explain, but his hand trembled, bound to the IV line. "I tried my best, Danny," he whispered. "I wasn't perfect, but everything I did—" "You did for yourself," Daniel interrupted, stepping closer. "You always did what made you look good to others. You were the beloved teacher, the wise man, but at home you were never there. Not when Mom cried herself to sleep. Not when I begged you to come to my soccer games. You missed every one of them, Dad." Richard's eyes filled with tears. He remembered those days vividly. The long nights at school, the meetings, the papers to grade. He thought he was building a better life for his family. He thought they understood. But now, seeing the pain in his son's eyes, he realized how blind he'd been. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said quietly. "I wish I could take back." "You can't," Daniel snapped, stepping closer to the bed. "You can't take back years, Dad. You can't take back what you stole from us." The beeping of the monitor seemed to grow louder, faster. Richard's breath hitched as fear crept into his chest. "Daniel, please, sit down, we can talk." But Daniel didn't move to sit. Instead, he reached for the tube that connected to the oxygen machine. His fingers brushed against it, and Richard's heart nearly stopped. "Daniel," he said, voice shaking, "don't. This is your last breath, old man," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling with something between fury and pain. "Now you'll know what it's like to be suffocated by someone who's supposed to love you." Richard's eyes widened in horror as Daniel's hand tightened around the tube. Panic surged through him, not from fear of dying, but from the heartbreak of seeing the child he raised consumed by such darkness. He tried to speak, to reach out, but his body was weak. The air grew thinner, the sound of the machine faded. In those few seconds, Richard didn't think of his regrets or his mistakes. He thought of Daniel as a baby giggling in his arms, of the first time he taught him to ride a bike, of the nights he carried him to bed after falling asleep on the couch, and through the pain he whispered the only words his heart could form. "I love you, son." Daniel froze. His hand trembled. Those 4 words, simple, quiet, unconditional, pierced through the wall of anger that had been building inside him for years. He let go of the tube, stumbling back. The oxygen hissed again. Richard gasped, breathing shallowly, but alive. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He looked down at his trembling hands, horrified at what he had almost done. He stumbled out of the room before the nurses arrived, leaving his father weak but alive, his heart torn open yet strangely calm. When the nurse rushed in, she found Richard barely conscious. His oxygen levels were dangerously low, but he managed to whisper, "Ah, my son, find my son." Hours later, as the night deepened, Daniel sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, staring at his shaking hands. He couldn't stop replaying that moment, the look in his father's eyes, the words that cut through the chaos in his heart. He had almost killed the man who gave him life. And yet, the man had still said he loved him. For the next few days, Richard remained under close observation. The doctors said he was stable, but his heart had weakened. He didn't tell anyone what happened. Not the nurses, not the police, not even the social worker who came to check on him. He only said he wanted to see his son again. 3 days later, Daniel returned. He entered the room quietly, his head bowed, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He didn't look like the same person. The anger was gone, replaced by guilt and sorrow. "Dad," he said softly, standing at the foot of the bed, "you should have told them. You should have told them what I did." Richard smiled weakly. "And ruin your life? No, son, you're still my boy." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. "How can you still say that, after what I almost—" "Because I'm your father," Richard interrupted gently, "and fathers, they don't stop loving their children, even when they're broken, even when they make mistakes." Daniel fell to his knees beside the bed, his sobs shaking his body. He buried his face in his father's hand, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the machines and Daniel's quiet sobbing. Richard slowly raised his trembling hand and placed it on his son's head. "It's not too late, son," he said. "You can still change. Don't let this moment define you. Let it free you." From that day forward, something shifted inside Daniel. He didn't just visit his father, he stayed with him. He helped feed him, bathed him, cleaned his room. Every day he saw the man he almost took away, the man who chose forgiveness over Reeve. It broke something inside him, but it also began to heal something too. Weeks turned into months. Richard's health improved slowly. He started talking to the other patients, sharing his story, not about what Daniel had done, but about forgiveness, about how love can change even the darkest hearts. The nurses began calling him the miracle teacher, not because he survived, but because he found peace in pain. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, Daniel sat beside his father, holding his hand. "Dad," he said quietly, "I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to fix myself. I didn't realize how much anger I carried, how much I blamed you for my own mistakes." Richard smiled. "I know, son. The hardest part of life isn't falling. It's forgiving yourself after you fall." Daniel nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Do you ever think you can forgive me?" Richard looked at him with that same softness that once melted his rage. "I already have. That night, Daniel." Stayed until his father fell asleep. As he watched the old man breathe, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. For the first time, he didn't see his father as the man who failed him, but as a man who tried his best, who loved him in the only way he knew how. Months later, Richard was discharged from the hospital. He moved into a small apartment where Daniel visited often. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of silence, moments of pain, but there was also laughter again, small moments that mattered more than years of distance ever did. And then one morning, Richard didn't wake up. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, a faint smile on his face, as if he knew his work on earth was finally done. Daniel found him that morning. He sat beside his father's bed, tears streaming down his face, but this time they weren't tears of guilt, they were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance he was given, for the forgiveness he didn't deserve, and for the love that refused to die. At the funeral, Daniel spoke for the first time in front of people. His voice trembled as he looked at the small crowd, friends, former students and hospital staff who came to say goodbye. "My father," he began, "was a teacher, not just in the classroom but in life. He taught me that no matter how broken a person becomes, love can still reach them. I almost became the reason his story ended, but because of him, I learned how to begin mine again." He paused, taking a deep breath. "If any of you are holding on to anger, resentment or pain, let it go before it destroys you. Forgive the ones who hurt you, even if they never say sorry. Because forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you." The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to still. In that moment, Daniel wasn't the man who once tried to end his father's life. He was a man reborn from the ashes of regret and love. Years passed, and Daniel carried his father's legacy forward. He started volunteering at youth centers, speaking to troubled teens, sharing his story, the story of a son who lost himself in anger and found redemption in forgiveness. People listened. Some cried, some even began their own healing journeys after hearing his words, and sometimes late at night, when he looked at the stars, Daniel whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me, for loving me when I was unlovable." Because deep down he knew his father didn't just survive that night in the hospital, he transformed it into something greater. A lesson, a legacy. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, love can still breathe life back into the broken. And that's the message Richard Hale left behind, that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need love the most. That sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean weakness, it means strength beyond measure. It means choosing peace over pain, love over hatred. Because in the end it wasn't the oxygen machine that kept Richard alive. It was love, the same love that turned a story of near death into a story of rebirth. If you're still listening right now, let this story remind you, no matter how deep your wounds run, no matter how heavy your regrets feel, there is always a way back. There's always a reason to forgive, to love, to try again. Because healing doesn't happen when time passes, it happens when hearts open. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't being saved by someone else, it's saving yourself through forgiveness. So, if you've ever been hurt, betrayed, or broken by someone close, let go of the anger before it becomes your prison. And if you've ever been the one who caused the pain, remember, it's never too late to make things right, because as long as you're breathing, as long as your heart still beats, your story isn't over yet. If that story gave you a little sense of justice, tap like button and subscribe my channel, Moves to Next.